Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am unusually excited for today's episode, more so than my usual self, because today's entrepreneur, there's so many aspects of the way that he thinks, the way that his entrepreneurial journey started, which I'm going to tease you with a little bit of that story in just a few seconds here, but I can tell that this guy absolutely loves business. He absolutely loves growth. He absolutely loves thinking his way through problems, and he has the resilience and determination and of course the talent to match and rise to the occasion in all of those ways. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Josh Fein. Josh has been selling weed since college. Well, kind of. And bear in mind, this is going to be a family-friendly episode. The reason why weed factors into it is because before cannabis went mainstream, he was designing packaging for his friends, let's call them entrepreneurial ventures, unknowingly kickstarting a career in branding that took him from underground operations to shaping some of the biggest cannabis brands in the world. Over the past decade, he's worked with Disney, Starbucks, and Domino's, helping brands evolve, stand out, and sell a whole lot more. Now he's putting his money where his mouth is with Hyperbolic, a new venture built on the principle that to the victor go the spoils. With past campaigns driving 30% month-over-month sales growth, adding $600,000 in monthly revenue, and securing more than $10 million in investor funding, Hyperbolic flips marketing from an expense into a profit center. I think that's such an important part of the conversation that we'll be talking about here today. In a world where AI, Fiverr, and cheap international labor have commoditized creativity, real value comes from bold, strategic execution that moves the needle, with low upfront costs and profit-sharing incentives to ensure that brands only pay for results. I think all of that is just a little bit of a teaser about how brilliant today's guest is, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Josh Fein. All right, Josh, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Brian, I'm excited to be here today too.
Heck yes, you've got a lot to live up to, Josh, and I'm going to kick it back to you for you to start the party by taking us beyond the bio. Who's Josh? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
So I grew up in Dallas, Texas. As you know, it's very conservative, straightforward. You kind of know what you're getting. Went to University of Texas at Austin, where I was in the creative sequence, and oddly enough, didn't even really make it out of the first round of that. So this is kind of a little bit of a vindication, which feels good. But moved up to Colorado after getting a couple of really cool internships. Being in Colorado allowed me to start working in the cannabis industry. And after about 10 years or so of being up there, moved way back down to Dallas, be closer to family, and seeing the cannabis industry here kind of led me to start thinking again about jumping back into it. So for the last couple of years, been running my own design studio and now pivoting to work on a pay if you win sort of revenue stream.
Yeah, I love that overview. We're going to talk about all things creativity. You already interjected that word into the conversation, but before we get there, I do want to talk to that creative mind of yours, especially knowing that you've been in the branding space for quite some time. You do really cool work, Josh, and I moved to Florida from Los Angeles, and I will say I was in LA during the time of cannabis really on the come up. Obviously, it's a hugely emerging industry, multi-billion-dollar industry at this point, and what always amazed me about driving through the streets of Los Angeles is that you can tell a cannabis brand when you see one. You can tell the smoke shops when you see them. And so with your branding hat on, I'm so interested. Part of branding is obviously about fitting in so that people know what industry you're in, but then part of it is also standing out. How do you navigate that delicate balance?
So it's kind of talking to the whole industry in general. You know, cannabis is, for what it's worth, selling one product. It just happens to be as an edible or a vape or flower or whatever it might be. So how do you describe it or how do you position it in a different way? So yeah, you have a lot of these stonery, high timesy dispensaries and stuff. And then you also have a couple of the outliers and the specialists. And I think it all comes down to the general rule of, you know, target market, which is if you are trying to speak to everyone, you end up speaking to no one. And so a lot of those shops are really just betting on the foot traffic coming in rather than getting people to go out of their way to solve one of their problems.
Yeah, and with that in mind, obviously you understand the industry from a young age. I love how young your entrepreneurial endeavors start. With that in mind, Josh, you've obviously seen the evolution of the industry through legal things that have happened along the way, through more mass adoption and all the different products and all the different forms that you alluded to. When you look at the landscape of how things have been and how they're changing, what is it that you see and what you look at? Because obviously you see opportunities there.
Yeah, the reality is cannabis is still not legal, federally speaking, worldwide speaking, but the proof of concept over the last decade plus has really been a Kickstarter around the world. I mean, you have, I think it's Thailand or Vietnam. I'm sorry for getting that wrong, but they have some of the most lax cannabis laws now after coming back from some of the harshest, you know, jail time you can get for having a joint on you. You have different states like Oklahoma, which is extremely conservative. I think they voted 70+% to make it fully recreationally legal. And I think what's really interesting is how CBD has kind of been that foot in the door with a lot of people that are kind of afraid of it or timid, or maybe just grown up their whole life thinking it's one of the worst things in the world. So now driving around Dallas, I see a CBD store almost as often as I see a Starbucks now. And it's only a matter of time before politicians or laws or whatever you're going to want to say get to a point where they're realizing how much money is left on the table. And just a quick anecdote for that, living in Colorado, every year I got money back on my taxes because they brought in so much money from cannabis tax that they always hit the limit to what they could give back to schools, to roads and hospitals. So they were able to give it back to the citizens of the state. It's incredible just how much money is there to be made. And I know it's just waiting for people to figure out how they can get a hold of it.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really appreciate about your work, Josh, is that you've had a lifelong career in business where you've learned incredible business fundamentals and obviously excelled thanks to the skills and the talents that you have yourself. But I think far too often, a lot of people look at different industries and don't realize the fact that these are business fundamentals and foundations, and you can apply them elsewhere. If you and I had this conversation probably 15 years ago, a lot of people weren't treating the cannabis industry as mainstream business. They were applying kind of the streets and the hustle mentality to it, but you bring that business experience to it. A lot of people might look at your resume and say, okay, the Walt Disney Company to now doing the things that you're doing. How's all that translate? Because I know, having interviewed so many entrepreneurs, that business is business, but I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
So the first thing you mentioned was, the oddity of doing creative or advertising or design with cannabis. And a lot of my friends that are trying to become lawyers or they're trying to become HR or whatever that might be, I'm trying to push them into learning law in the cannabis industry because there's going to be a big need for that. People on the lab and operation and R&D side, there's going to be a need for that. But then also architecture, interior design, anything else that comes from any sort of business, brick and mortar mom and pop shop to a franchise fast food restaurant. It's just selling another product. And I think people are starting to understand what that is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even though it's selling another product, what I really like is that the business models, the ways we deliver services, the opportunities that we see, those are all different. It sounds to me from the outside looking in like you honestly are applying a different type of model to the work that you're doing these days. Talk to us about Hyperbolic. Talk to us about how you've set this business up for success, not only your success, but the success of your clients. And it really sounds like you deeply care as well about the success of the industry.
I mean, that's the reality of it. We're all kind of in this together. And once you kind of lower that facade of, oh, we're trying to charge you this much or we can make you this much. And it's just the understanding like, hey, we're trying to be a successful business. We know you guys have numbers you want to beat. Can we bet that both of those are possible? And the reality is yes. And so being able to pitch to cannabis companies about how much it costs to do a project for a rebrand and how much we can get in return. The reality is, after interviewing a lot of people over the last few months, as much as I didn't want to hear it, people don't care about how good the work is in creative excellence. We did a branding project for about $75K. It took about 6 months, and their sales went up by 30 times. That's incredible. However, for their next product, we got an RFP and we were up against a couple other agencies, and they chose the more affordable agency, even though they knew how well we did our work. And it's that understanding of, it doesn't matter how good you are. And to be honest, like, I don't see myself as the best person out there in any of the specific mediums that I work in. But being able to figure out how to best give value back, that's what people are looking for. So with Hyperbolic, it's understanding the lucky situation I'm in that I can actually offer more of a pay if we win model. Being able to offer people, when they say, how much does it cost? We say, well, nothing. We're just going to take X amount off of the goals that we beat. Idea being, you should never be net negative. You should never worry, is this marketing spend going to convert? Is this aesthetic that you don't like going to, talk to your consumers? We really approach it from a value-based proposition, which is, what are your goals? If we beat these goals, would you say that we can take X amount off of the top of that? So from a business perspective, it's allowed us to really focus on, not just trying to pad hours for work or trying to slow down on something that should be really easy, but has a really big ROI. But also moving away from just the hourly model of design retainers and understanding there's other ways to solve business problems. One of the companies that we're working with, we looked through their sales and they have 75 different discounts. That has led to them losing like anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 at every store, just from putting in discounts or people not knowing what they can or can't get. And just by consolidating some of these discounts, so instead of a senior Sunday and a tincture Tuesday, we give a tincture discount to seniors on Sundays, which then pushes them to then go the health and wellness route, increase their basket size, pick up some other CBD products. And just by able to do that to one store and potentially across 13 to 15 stores, they could bring in an extra $500,000 in revenue just by consolidating discounts. And those are the fun things that we like to find. And it's just a puzzle with these creative constraints of being in the cannabis market.
Yeah, Josh, as someone who talks to entrepreneurs for a living, I would argue that most branding experts and most creatives don't throw around the words value and ROI the way that you do. And so I want to go there with you because I think this is such an important thing for all of us to consider. We don't necessarily, I guess I'll back up for a second. A lot of times we talk about branding as this sort of intangible thing. We build a brand, our customers and clients are part of that brand building process because it's all the things that they say about us as well. We have our internal team cultures. It's this really intangible thing that it's hard to put our finger on. Cross that bridge for us, because clearly you see and you've proven in your real life client case studies about that bridge between branding and revenue, branding and ROI, branding and that value that you deliver. What's that look like? How do you measure it? How do you paint that picture for us?
So our branding studio is actually called Metafor, and that's what we believe a brand is. People might have this preconceived notion of what a word or a visual might mean to them, but it might be something completely different to me. And what we want to do is make sure that people's perception is aligned with what your goals are. So if you need to go through a rebrand because you had some issues in the past, and make sure people trust you again. For example, how do you say trust us without saying trust us? It's really fun to do that type of project. But for example, with a brand called Everyday Weed, they were trying to push it as EDW and put a really big modern technology sort of aesthetic to it. And sales were not affecting that at all, because their clientele, their target market that we found out, were all of the more or less average cannabis consumers over the last few years who have this analysis paralysis when they go into a store and they just want a joint or weed or whatever it might be. So us being able to work backwards on who we're actually talking to and what problem we're solving, we were able to add that sort of vintagey, old school baseball athletic aesthetic to the Everyday Weed brand. And, within 3 months, they were able to create sales up to 30x. And not just that, but it's been so successful that they took that brand and have been building out their own dispensaries based around that brand in New Mexico right now. So really excited to see when you utilize creative problem solving not just how cool or good does this look, but what resonates with your target market, and not maybe just you. You give people a reason to want to interact with your brand and tell friends about their brand and stuff like that. So it's fun to see where they can kind of go and, take its legs.
Yeah, Josh, I'll tell you what, I've never asked someone like you this next question, but I fully trust you to take us there because I know how much you love the branding and creative side of this, but also the business side. And I'll preface this question by saying we've all heard this phrase in marketing that content is king. And if you put enough good content out there, amazing things will happen for your business. And I have been trying to crack the YouTube nut for a long time now. And the more I talk to incredible YouTube experts, they tell me, they're just like, no, YouTube is so saturated at this point that you have to know, they call it packaging. So in the world of YouTube, packaging is what's your title? What are the tags that you apply to it? What's your thumbnail look like? The content itself is there and it'll always be there, but now you have to package it to make it effective. And hearing you talk about these real life brands that you've worked with, where my head goes is I equate the YouTube packaging to the product. And I'm just like, are you saying that the product isn't what it's all about? Everyone always preaches, just have a great product and the rest takes care of itself. What I'm hearing today is, no, it matters how you brand it, how you build things around it to support it. So that's my loaded question to you, Josh, is a good product good enough these days?
It's never been good enough. A good product is only good if people are actually using it. And the analogy I could use for that is people trying to sell themselves, whether they are, software sales or they run their own landscaping company. The common thing I hear is, well, if I can just talk to someone, I can explain to them why I'm the best. And once I do that, people love me and they want to become a client. And my issue is, how do you get people to want to talk to you? And that's, talking about the YouTube packages, that you're building that metaphor, that overall story that you hopefully resonate with your target. So yeah, in terms of content creation, in terms of YouTube and getting more views, honest take, I cold turkey quit all social media about 3-4 months ago. Because it's just, for lack of words, at the brain rot stage. Short form media, I hate. I will watch long form media. I'll watch your videos and things like that. But anything that's getting you just 5-second dopamine hit, 3-second dopamine hit, you get caught in that loop. And from the other side of it, from the creation side of it too, it feels just like a losing battle where, 10 years ago, we would spend, 2 days on a photo shoot for just a social campaign. Whereas now it's, how can you lower your quality of production and just put out as much as you can? So what I'm hoping for by the end of this year is a complete 180 on quality of content versus amount of content. Is that actually going to happen? I don't know, but that's my hope. I want more effort to go back into social media or just general artistry in the world. It's things that you enjoy. It's, just creative content. Put some effort into it, because right now it's just so saturated. If you're scrolling through, it's the same influencers selling the same thing. And I feel like we should have hit a limit already, but I'm not sure. You tell me, you're still on it.
Yeah, Josh, honestly, I hope that we are about to hit that limit. And you're very much preaching to the choir here. I'm obviously biased as a podcaster. To me, we saw, obviously we don't go into politics here on the show, but we even saw in the past election cycle the value of long form content. Every candidate across all the national and state races has realized that you don't make tangible change in 10 to 30 second segments. And so that's the way that it has been the past few years. Use the word brain rot, and I am so on board with going as far as calling it that. And podcasting gives us these substantial conversations. Yes. We can bite our teeth into these things. So I'm definitely biased, and I love hearing how you're doing essentially the industry equivalent for your world of podcasting in your industry is having those meaningful, substantial campaigns, branding, strategy going into all of these projects. We've already kind of thrown a little bit of shade on social media. I want to go straight to AI with you, Josh, because I obviously know, and you and I talked about it off the air, about how much AI not only affected your businesses, but also your industry as creatives, not looking at the cannabis industry. Please please give listeners the backstory there, what those considerations were, and really what should we be thinking about in the role of AI helping us to grow in the future?
So I'll try to reference what we had talked about, which is turning my mentality from this is the end to, okay, I think I can finally utilize it. And I know everyone is going to think that's the general goal of anything. But really being in the creative industry, especially being on the production side, seeing AI get to that quality point about 16 or 18 months ago was already a little scary. Being able to utilize ChatGPT for just general project management, day-to-day scheduling and things like that was awesome. And then Midjourney came out and it was really interesting. You can how do you prompt these different things to get what you want to? And so you still needed that sort of art direction or scene setting to really get where you wanted to get at. But the issue at that point was anyone could just put in a prompt that's like, Mona Lisa made out of Legos, and it would do that perfectly because it's very, simple prompt and things like that. And that is the type of stuff that normal people would love to purchase and buy and put on their walls and stuff like that. So again, it's small steps to see where it's going to, but once it started being able to produce video, full 3D graphics, literally go to a website, put that URL in and have it break it all down for you to code so that you can put it in, it's getting to the point where it started getting really scary. And it wasn't until I think January of last year where it really affected us. There was a new model that was put out, and not putting any blame on it, but 2 of our 6 clients went through restructuring, which meant that we were losing our contract and they were firing people. 2 of our other clients sold their companies and their brands because they're trying to get out of the space as well. And so for myself running an agency, that was, one of the first falls of, oh, I'm a CEO and I have to deal with this. So try to stay on a good path for as long as we could up until I think it was last July where we finally put, a pause on everything and started taking a breath. And that's when I actually met my newest mentor, who I had worked with, or not worked with, I had tried to work with. He was the head of Disney creative when I was there. And every month I would try to hit him up saying that I knew someone that he knew and we were trying to connect. And long story short, he never saw those emails. But when he started his own agency and was posting about it on Instagram, I hit him up randomly after a couple drinks out. He posted about mentoring. And so I said, I'd be a great mentoree. And I went to bed, and the next morning I woke up thinking, I need to delete that. But he responded saying, how can I help? And from there, it was just showing the inverse perspective that I had of the industry and where he was. And, long story short, he got me back on a right path of taking care of myself, my health, mental state, but really trying to understand what I can use with my experience and what problems I can solve in the world. And with that, understanding what my goals are of how do I increase my revenue versus chasing every project and things like that. We were able to kind of shift my perspective, which is hey, do you guys use AI? It's does it matter? We're not trying to cut down on hours and increase our profits. We're just going to make sure that your goals are met. Do you work with outsourced talent or Fiverr or the race to the bottom? How cheap can you go? It's we could. Again, it doesn't matter. If I can do it, if I get other people in the industry to do it, we're going to increase your goals. So stop trying to worry about that, because AI is one thing, but also the race to the bottom and pricing around the world is also so scary. And you want to hear a hot take? I don't think there's going to be any creative production roles based out of America in 3 years. There you go.
Yeah, Josh, I love these. I'm going to say, I love the bold claim because to me, as someone who interviews entrepreneurs and business leaders and really thought leaders for a living, I see things that you're saying and thinking that are far ahead of the curve right now. And if you don't mind, I actually want to reveal some of those things that have got me so excited to connect with you here today. I want to read those for listeners because When we talk about this transformation that you went through and the way that you view AI, listeners, here's one thing that Josh noted down for us on his questionnaire is that he leverages AI to act as his creative counsel, debating ideas, stress testing strategies, and automating the work that slows creatives down. And Josh, here's where I think that you're far ahead. I don't know if this is the first time you've articulated it this way, but you're also a very talented communicator, because you wrote, it's not about replacing creativity, it's about engineering an advantage in a world that's making it harder than ever to stay ahead. Talk to us about those use cases, because Josh, I mean, that is verbiage of a visionary leader inside the world of AI, not one that's trying to work around AI, but fully stepping into that role. I'd love for you to share more about that.
Yeah, I mean, the last part of that was what was able to switch my perspective, which is understanding I need to kind of remove the need of my ego to work with only humans for what it's worth. But I think the kind of foot in the door of that, what started making me not as scared's not the right word, but worried, anxious, was starting just using it as my day-to-day planner and executive assistant, if you would. That led to me spending months on prompt engineering because, I'm trying to start getting into AI. How do I use it for myself? And, fast forward after learning it, and I have created my own GPTs that are actually different roles. So I've, for what it's worth, taken how a previous project manager of mine goes through our SOP on how they respond to emails, how they respond to clients, how they put things in a timeline, and the deliverables and the messaging and everything. And I've been able to automate that through Notion automations and using our API key on these specific ChatGPT models. And once you kind of start checking out like one of these cool things at a time, that's when you start realizing everything has this like multiplication effect. So the coolest thing I think I have is 4 different creative personalities, and I'll pitch an idea to them and I'll essentially have them all yell at each other and give the best suggestion and feedback. And so you're still needing that overall problem solving of why are you even doing what you're doing. It's the concept of the programmer versus the program. Is it the same as people seeing computers for the first time and it's like, I'm trying to write a document, why hasn't it done it already? I mean, now you can kind of fast forward and get to that point, but still, what are you writing? Why are you writing it? What is that goal? So until we get to that point, I will still just say please and thank you to all of my AI overlords.
Yes, same, Josh. 100% guilty of doing the exact same. I want to ask you this as we race towards the end. I want to squeeze in a few more questions with you, because hearing the way that your executive and entrepreneurial mind thinks, I have to ask you this question. It's a super broad one, but what's the future of Hyperbolic? It's so clear to me that you are so committed to leveraging all of the advantages that you have. I'm just going to say AI is one of those many. I think that your creative mind, your vision, your strategy, your business understanding, all of those things factor into just part of your advantage. So what's that future of Hyperbolic when you look at where we are and where it is that we're going cumulatively as a society, as your company, as an industry that you're operating in? I'd love to hear how you think about the future.
So Hyperbolic, we are, the growth experts for cannabis companies right now. Utilizing my experience in the industry, my connections and my network, and my passion for it. Every time I talk about it, I feel like I have to light up because I just get so excited. And it might just be the, overcoming that stigma of whenever you bring it up, someone might already have some sort of hold back or position on that. So being able to kind of prove them wrong is a fun sort of thing. But the future is essentially, how can I grow a company that has more recurring revenue and can pay you out based on the quality of work that you create. There have been so many times freelancing where you are getting a terrible hourly rate, but you work on a great brand, and the opposite, you're working on a terrible brand or with a terrible team, but you're getting paid well, versus doing a one-off project for someone that you could have, asked for more money. It's all of these issues that come together with pricing and how can you outfox these companies that have more money and whatever it might be. And this concept of value-based pricing, which I, definitely stole from this guy named Blair Enns. Highly suggest checking him out. Two Bob's podcast. Highly suggest for agency owners. I've been wanting to try and go in that direction for years, but it's never given me that opportune time. And so once you start seeing things connect, like the cannabis industry and me coming to Texas and seeing where it can go and understanding different pricing structures, and then interviewing people in the industry because I thought I knew stuff, but my mentor was like, you need to interview them. I think all these things coming together are, make it the perfect time for Hyperbolic to really, show what creatives can earn on their creative work. And in terms of the future, going from Hyperbolic just cannabis to health and wellness, anything that deals with other sort of legalities or, specific legal compliance and things like that. Anything that can help companies grow and that we can kind of share that value together. I think that's going to be the future, because it's currently a race to the bottom in terms of pricing, in terms of hourly rate, in terms of expertise. There's a lot of mid-level creatives that aren't finding jobs because it's either going to juniors out of college or, keeping the seniors and execs on board. It's kind of, how can you change your future, having a goal in mind, and what steps are you going to be taking to making sure that comes true?
Gosh, Josh, I am so glad that you are one of these CEOs and founders and visionaries pushing all of these changes that you shared with us here today, because I will say this on air and probably make you blush a little bit, but I think you're absolutely brilliant in all of the different things that you do, and hearing the way that you think about it. Yeah, I mean, seriously, it's something that you and I joked about off air, is making our parents proud. And Josh, the fact that you bring up the stigma, and I would argue that anyone who hears you talk about any of these business principles, this is good business. This is the way that you see opportunities and you see service to others, and you make these positive changes in an industry. And I love the fact that you alluded to future growth plans, including health and wellness and all these other things, because I think I know these good practices are going to extrapolate out and affect the business world as a whole. So huge kudos to you. Before I say how much I'm excited about following your growth, I'm going to ask you the question that I ask at the end of every episode, and that is, what's your one best piece of advice? You've dropped so many nuggets of knowledge on our listeners, but knowing that they're both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, what's that one piece of advice that you want to leave them with today?
Just ask. And what I mean by that is, don't try and pitch someone that you can do something. Just ask on a personal basis. And what I mean by that is, my very first internship I ever got, I was trying to email a bunch of agencies with a big background and, resume, who I am. And the one person that got back to me was when I said, screw it, I'm just going to write a very honest email that says, I don't have a portfolio. I need that to graduate, but I'll work like hell. And that's the one I got. When I met with my new mentor, Karan, I just randomly messaged him asking if he would be interested. And I asked him on our first call why he accepted. And he said, because you asked. It's the reality of not necessarily going in as, the underling or what it is, but showing the person that you're asking that you kind of want to follow in their footsteps. Because everyone can give you advice. Everyone's a critic. But once you have someone that's in that future state you want to be in, hit them up. See if they have any interest in talking with you. Because I can tell you, any creative worth their gall wants to spend 10 minutes stroking their ego on fun stuff that they built. But yeah, just ask. LinkedIn, find people that are in the industry you want to work in that are a little higher up, and connect with them and ask if they can look at your portfolio, or ask how they got from A to B. I think there's a really big negative towards reaching out to people because of social media. And I think you can just get rid of that. You can message someone absolutely cold saying, hey, love the work you're doing. Nothing else. We can talk later. And just, enjoying that, and not trying to just keep vying against other people and competing and trying to pitch. Yeah, just be honest, ask, and smile. There you go.
Yes, I love that, Josh. That advice has been so pivotal for me 17 years ago. When I was 19 years old and I started my first business, is that I quickly realized when you view the world through the lens of, gosh, most people want to help other people, you'll find that to be the reality. And I'll also say that as a podcast host with listeners all over the world in over 150 countries, I know firsthand, Josh, how few people actually take that step and reach out to people who inspire them, reach out to people that they want to learn from. So listen, by virtue of you just following Josh's advice, you're going to stand out because most other people won't do it. So Josh, I love that advice for our listeners. I personally, you called out LinkedIn as a platform where people can reach out. I love your LinkedIn. I love the way you show up. I love all the verbiage that you've got on there, from your bio to the way you describe your experiences and companies and all the great content there. So I'll use that as a segue. Drop those links on us for listeners who want to learn about all the great things that you're doing across your businesses and personally. Where should they go from here?
Well, like I said, I'm off of social media, but if I am back on, you can find me at the Fein Print, spelled Fein, on LinkedIn under Joshua Fein. You can follow our branding agency, which is made by Metafor spelled with an F. And soon you'll be able to follow us on Hyperbolic. That's Hyperbolic, HYBR, PR. And just finding cool ways to show some work. Hopefully you'll see us in some creative annuals and in the news, but most importantly, I'll be excited to see myself on this podcast.
Heck yes, I love that, Josh. Listeners, you already know the drill. We're making it as easy as possible for you to find all of those links down below, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Check those show notes. We're linking to Josh's company's websites, his personal LinkedIn, all those links that he just shared with us, so you don't have to memorize them or think about spelling. Just click right on through from the show notes. Otherwise, Josh, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks so much. It was a bunch of fun. And hey, if you find me on LinkedIn, hit me up. I'll be there.